Hello all, hope you're doing well today. Today we are talking about responses and adaptations to resistance training. This is chapter 5, it's part 1. We're going to be talking more about the acute responses. Here we go. So really with this chapter, kind of expect for you to be able to describe the acute responses and chronic adaptations to resistance training, as well as identify factors that affect the magnitude or rate of adaptations to resistance training, and identify how to design resistance training programs that maximize specific adaptations of interest for bodybuilding or whatever it is. Identify how to avoid overtraining with resistance training and describe the effects of detraining and identify how to reduce them. Acute and chronic responses to resistance training refers to the changes that occur in the body in response to resistance training. Acute responses occur immediately during or after a single training session. Chronic responses occur over time with repeated training sessions. Their adaptational changes and the health implications of resistance exercise are dynamic and variable to each individual. For lasting change, there needs to be a systematic administration of a sufficient stimulus, followed by an adaptation of the individual, and then the introduction of new, progressively greater stimulus. The key to inducing a positive response is to use the principle of progressive overload, increasing the intensity or volume of exercise program using a systematic and gradual approach. Resistance training can lead to both acute and chronic adaptations in the body. Acute adaptations occur primarily in the neurological, muscular, and endocrine systems, while chronic adaptations are seen in the muscular, skeletal, endocrine, cardiovascular, and neurological systems. The increased ability of skeletal muscle to generate force following resistance training results from two important changes. Number one, the adaptation of the muscle fiber itself, and two, the extent to which the motor unit can activate the muscle or neural adaptation that occurs. Changes in the nervous system input resulting from resistance training include a recruitment of an increased number and firing rate of motor units. So you're able to recruit more muscle fibers and they are synchronizing so that they are firing, more motor units are firing. And you also have an increased reflex potentiation. Now, progressive overload of the muscle produced by resistance training has been shown to increase the cross-sectional area of the muscle. So you're increasing the size of the muscle. And that's mostly a result of the increase in myofibrillar volume of the individual muscle fiber or hypertrophy, and not necessarily because of an increase in the number of muscle fibers themselves. Now, chronic training adaptations occur in phases. Typically, you're going to see an increase in strength first, then you're going to start to see an increase in mass or tone, and eventually an increase in bone density. Now, the main physiological adaptations are due to strength training are muscle fiber type conversions and an increase in muscle cross-sectional areas. So you're having a change from type 1 muscle fibers to more of type 2 muscle fibers. And you're seeing, again, an increase in the size of the muscle itself. An increase in muscle fiber peak output, so how much power you're able to put out, and an increased voluntary activation of muscles. You're able to call on those particular muscles, and an increased discharge and torque development rate of motor units, really just saying an increase in force production, and an increased motor unit synchronization, so they're firing together, and decreases in the coactivation of the antagonist muscles. So if you're working biceps, then there's a decrease in the coactivation of the triceps. These adaptations work together to improve key factors such as strength and power, both of which are principal indicators of anaerobic performance. So strength training results in physiological adaptations to the body, which, as discussed, can be split into two subgroups: muscle fiber responses and neuromuscular responses. These adaptations work together to improve key factors such as strength and power, both of which are principal indicators of anaerobic performance. The muscle fiber responses look at the fiber type conversions experienced from strength training. the muscles and muscle fibers cross-sectional area, and the fiber's ability to produce peak power. The second category is neuromuscular responses, which includes the level of voluntary activation of muscles, the discharge and torque development rates of motor units, and the level of motor unit synchronization, along with the relationship of the co-activation between agonist and antagonist muscles. Consistently incorporating resistance training in the weekly workout routine can help you achieve a stronger and leaner body. Individuals can respond differently to exercises, so some exercises can see slow progress in building muscles no matter how hard and consistent they exercise. Others can develop quickly to improve on some challenging exercises like a push-up in a shorter amount of time. It's because there are major factors that can affect the results of a strength training program. Gender is one of those. Men have a significantly higher level of testosterone hormone that is responsible for increased muscle mass than women. This explains why females will always have a harder and longer time building muscle when lifting weights. Studies show that a consistent exerciser can only gain 1 to 2 pounds of muscle per month, despite the serious weight training routine. After age 30, you can start to lose 3 to 5% of muscle mass for every decade of your life. Age-related muscle loss or sarcopenia can be prevented and managed by regular resistance training. As you age, strength training becomes more important for maintaining and improving muscle strength and endurance. That can make you perform daily functional movements like household chores and recreational activities safely and effectively. Keep in mind, for every pound of muscle approximately burns 6 calories per day. Your genetic makeup plays a huge role in your body type and when it comes to muscle building response to a strength training program. If you have more fast twitch muscle fibers than slow twitch for endurance activities like marathon running, muscle fibers in your body, then you are more efficient in doing weightlifting and sprints. However, both fast twitch and slow twitch fibers can improve with constant training. Some of the acute responses to resistance training include synchronization, which is the capacity to contract motor units simultaneously or with minimum latency with a delay of less than 5 milliseconds. There's also an increase in the recruitment, the capacity to recruit motor units simultaneously, and rate coding, which is the capacity to increase the firing rate or motor unit discharge rate in order to express more strength. One of the acute effects in muscle during resistance training is the depletion of metabolic substrates, such as creatine phosphate and glycogen. The depletion of those two fuel sources during resistance training causes muscle power production to decrease. Another significant acute muscle adaptation during resistance training is the intramuscular elevation of hydrogen that results in a burning sensation in the muscles on multiple repetitions. The elevation of hydrogen ions in the muscle results in a decreased intramuscular pH. There are two major types of hormones produced by the pituitary glands that respond to resistance training: protein and steroid hormones. Growth hormones and insulin are major protein hormones, and testosterone and estrogen are major steroid hormones. Resistance training acutely increases the concentration and release of both anabolic and catabolic proteins and steroid hormones. Growth hormones, testosterone, and insulin are anabolic hormones that facilitate the growth and recovery of muscle tissue after a resistance training session. However, equally, muscle degrading hormones or catabolic hormones are released during and after resistance training. The increase of cortisol, epinephrine, and norepinephrine secretion during resistance training can have positive short-term effects, but the long-term effects are negative. Higher volume and intensity of resistance training routine elicits a greater release of epinephrine. Therefore, it is prudent to eat proteins and carbohydrates before and after resistance training to prevent that catabolic effect from cortisol, epinephrine, and norepinephrine. Chronic adaptations to the endocrine system include an increased resting level of testosterone and increased sensitivity of tissue response to the release of protein and steroid proteins. That concludes more of the acute responses. We'll talk more in our next session about the chronic adaptations of resistance training. Talk to you soon.